So many of you may or may not know that I had suffered a swollen neck and a concussion during this quarantine, and yeah, it was a terrible experience. But from it, I'm learning that vulnerability, empathy, and rehabilitation can be a beautiful thing, and I'm here to share that story, and hopefully if anybody has been through something similar, they understand that they're not alone. God, my voice sounds so annoying right now. Give me one. So this is my story of injury, vulnerability, and the road to recovery. Here's that update. So it was Tuesday, March 17th, a day that I will never forget, that will continue to influence my life and change how I live it and how I plan for it. So I was scheduled for a 4-hour shift at the UBC bookstore. Many of you know that I work at the UBC bookstore, but I also have a secondary employer, and it was only a 4-hour shift, so I figured it would be fine. I was designated to our clothing section, and many of you know it's in kind of in its own corner, so I figured I would be safe. I was working next to a bathroom, so I could have easy access to hand sanitizer, the bathroom to wash my hands. It's a relatively easy job, so I figured it would be all right. That day we were severely understaffed, and I was told by 2 different supervisors that if they called all cashiers or designated cashier, that I was to go up to help clear the line. That day a lot of people were mass buying gloves, masks, goggles, and I just thought it was crazy, and having to interact with the customers made me a little bit nervous. So I remember being called up and getting that notification on the PA, and as I was setting clothes down, I was walking around a corner to get to our cashiers. You know the layout of our bookstore, you don't. I have to get to the front cashier from my clothing section right over here. So I'm walking this way. As I'm walking this way, there's a gentleman on the phone on top of the stairs over here. So like right here, he is running downstairs, talking on the phone, not looking where he's going. And as I'm crossing with him, we collide. And so, like, why are you running in the bookstore? Like, if you're supposed to be somewhere else, stay in your section, I guess. Normally, I don't look both ways before walking in the open space in the bookstore. Like, why would you? But I will say that I am looking both ways from now on because I'm worried something else will happen. I was walking very slowly because, as you can guess, I just did not want to be exposed to a lot of customers. But he was running down, and because he is so much bigger than I was, he didn't budge when we collided. But obviously I flew backwards because I am extra small. So I flew backwards, ricocheting off of his legs, his body, and instead of hitting the ground, I was grateful that he caught me. But when he caught me like this to ensure that I wouldn't fall. But because obviously I'm so much smaller, he had his hands around my neck like this. And my head, I mean, I'm grateful that he caught me, but going through what I had gone through, I wish he almost hadn't at that point. So hello friends, this is just a quick sidebar because I realized I forgot to mention what my doctor said in the haste of everything. I basically experienced something very similar to whiplash upon the collision. Number 1, it was the force of him running downstairs, so gravity pulling down and the speed at which he was running. The impact of his hands around, or like his arms around my neck and my head area, that caused the concussion-like symptoms that eventually became a concussion. And so whiplash is a neck injury due to forceful, rapid back and forth motion of the neck, like a cracking of a whip. I mean, I don't know how to feel about the accident. Number 1, I'm relieved and glad that he ended up catching me so that my head didn't hit something else. But I also think that the chances of me hitting my neck on something upon collision are lower. So I'm not sure how to feel, if I'm grateful anymore, if he grabbed onto my neck because of all the things I'm experiencing now. But it did happen. Unfortunately, it's really awkward now at work because, like I said, he works at the bookstore. He's higher seniority than me. This is his livelihood and his job, and he hasn't apologized and he's really avoiding me, and now it's just awkward for me. So that's just a fun fact. And I'm not trying to get an apology, I just don't want things to be awkward, and I don't want to make him uncomfortable because I know that this could be like his second home because he's always working. I ended up walking to the cashier after the collision. He caught me and then he threw me back out, and then he kept running downwards. So I went to the cashier's line up to see if the line was cleared, and they had cleared it, and I went back to our clothing section. And when I got to our clothing section, I realized I was having a lot of difficulty bending down and picking up things, turning my neck. So I walked back to my supervisor and I told him I was feeling a lot of discomfort. I asked him if he had seen the incident. He told another supervisor of his, and they called the medics first aid for me, and they checked it out and diagnosed that, yeah, I had a swollen neck, and they said it was probably going to get bigger over time. So the bookstore called for a taxi because they were worried about kind of being liable, I guess, if I was concussed, because there was no way to tell. There was the initial shock hit headache and nausea that I was feeling because I was feeling a lot of discomfort, but I assumed it was because I had just hit my head on someone's body. I called for a taxi, I went home, and I was bedridden for 1 to 2 weeks. And you have to understand that I was not moving or trying not to move at all to heal my neck, because everyone was very concerned and told me to like buy memory foam, don't get out of bed, make sure it's all right. So I had to rely a lot on other people, which was very hard because my regular day life is I wake up at 6 or 8 a.m. I go to the gym, I either go to class or I go to work. And then after class, I go to work, and then I get home around 10, and then I do like my work or whatever. I go to bed, I wake up the next morning, I wake up at 6 or 8, go to the gym. So I'm used to being very independent and not needing any help, and I'm used to doing everything on my own. So it was a big blow to me having to live a different life, but because it was quarantine, everyone's life had already kind of changed, so it was a whole story in and of itself. So I was bedridden, and then when I was finally able to get out of bed, I was finding that I was feeling a lot of nausea, a lot of discomfort, a lot of headaches. And during this whole ordeal where I was bedridden, I wasn't really feeling myself, but I thought I was just having headaches like normal. It just so happened that now that I was able to stand up and physically move, it was 10 times worse. And I understand that it was probably muscle weakness because I wasn't moving around during that period of time and my body was so used to moving, and now it was just weak all over. I totally understood that, but I wasn't unsure why my balance was so horrible. Like, I didn't understand it. So I wasn't able to see a clinic or a doctor because of COVID-19, and it just wasn't accessible for me. So we ended up doing telehelp and phone calls, and after explaining and describing the best I could, because I was having a lot of issues communicating, he told me that I had suffered from a concussion. So after speaking to my doctor and my physiotherapist, the best way I could describe what happened is that my neck is connected to a lot of soft tissue, and it has to do with a lot of connection to the lower area of my body. Not only that, but it's also connected to the brain. Inside my inner ear, there's a lot of cochlear fluid, and because now my other senses were weakened because of it and my brain was having issues, that I was relying more on my inner ear, and the fluid moving around inside was likely giving me like a headache or something. Sorry if I'm explaining this also not correctly. I am by no way a human anatomy or kinesiologist. So it was terrible that I wasn't able to get in real life physiotherapy, because I feel like it really would have helped me accelerate the process to healing. And most mild concussions, they actually heal within 6 weeks, but because I wasn't having access to the needs and the means that I could, unfortunately it didn't help my concussion very much. But right now I just feel like there's added pressure because I've had 2 months at home. What have I done and what can I show? A lot of people are doing online courses and they're learning how to cook, bake, learning new skills, and then I'm at home just trying to learn how to read again. Like, I'm actually not learning a new skill, but I'm trying to be productive. And while that may feel productive from like my therapist perspective, it doesn't always feel productive when I see people changing their lives dramatically, and here I am resetting life, trying to get back to where I once was, and having dedicated so much of my life to getting better and basically being stuck the same. That's just what it feels like. And there's just so much pressure because we are living in an era where there is so much technology, and I'm so grateful for that. But I'm still not getting the help that I need because I'm not a professional in any shape or way of having to deal with my body the way that I need, and the professional help that I actually do need. So I would explain it or describe it as getting 20% of the 100% that I needed. So also feeling the way that I was feeling about myself was terrible, because it felt like I was starting from negative 100 and everybody else was at like 80% and they were moving forward. So I'm working that much harder to get from negative 100 back to 0 just so I can try my best to get to 50, not knowing if I'll ever be 100% the way that I was. Studying in school and working hard in life, I always expected that my efforts would pay off in the future, but now it just feels like my whole life has reset and I can't really help myself, and I wish I could. My greatest worries is that, number one, my reflexes will never be the same, and although I am super grateful and super blessed to be a young enough age, I worry that I will never have the same reaction time, and I am more vulnerable now. Now, because I'm lying down most of the day and I'm not moving around very much, especially the first 5 weeks of my concussion, I was lying down a lot to deal with the headaches because I didn't want to always resort to Advil. It felt like I was being lazy. And because I am such an active person and I'm used to being so productive in the sense that I am getting things done, I am learning new things, and I'm helping people, it just felt very, very painful to be forced to rest and people look down on me and judge me. And after talking to my occupational therapist, I realized that nobody is really thinking what I'm thinking, and over judging yourself can sometimes be the worst thing for you. So just drown it all out and try to think the best about the world, even when the world is ending, basically. So it was my occupational therapist actually who recommended Brene Brown to me, and her TED Talks have really helped me. One of my favorite lines of her TED Talk is talking about the word courage. So courage has taken a lot of forms and changed its definition over time. The word courage actually derives from the word cor, which means heart in Latin. Vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when there's no control over the outcome. Vulnerability is not weakness, it is our greatest measure of courage. And the old definition of the word courage actually meant to speak one's mind by telling all of one's heart. And I feel like I get goosebumps just hearing about that, because I feel like it's true. Like, the heart is what makes us who we are. And I feel like I'm getting really sappy, and yes, I'm into poetry, and yes, I like to read a lot, and yes, I'm a complete nerd for that. I was having to pause a lot to figure out what I wanted to say. I was leaning up against surfaces, lying down, feeling super uncomfortable. I was taking 600 milligram Advil every day when I was feeling horrible about myself because of like the headaches and the nausea, and I would still have to do physiotherapy to try to better myself, but I didn't even know if I was doing my physiotherapy correctly because the webcam can only show so much and I'm only given like 30 minutes of help, and I wasn't able to see a doctor, and it was just a horrible feeling. It's also very worrisome, especially to my family and to myself, that I've sustained this concussion way longer. I know that if you normally are injured and you see a professional right away, you stop working and you get the help that you need, you recover faster, and in the long run of your life, you don't experience as much pain and difficulty. Now, I, on the other hand, I've sustained this for a very long time, as you can see, and I worry that even when or if I get better, that this won't reoccur and be way worse than it is right now because I waited so long to get professional help, even though I was basically frozen because of the quarantine and this pandemic, which is no one's fault, but this is how I feel. So in regards to work, I also find it a little bit awkward, and I don't know if a lot of people with concussions struggle with this, but at least when I had the swollen neck, it was a physical injury where you could see that I still needed to recover and that I was in pain. Versus my concussion, that's been very mental, obviously, has no visible features, so you can't see a tangible representation of the pain or anything. But it's very real and very painful, and I just hope that the stigma and the fact that you can't see it doesn't make people judge me more. And I think that was one of my biggest concerns, and which is something that I'm struggling with my occupational therapist talking about, and I just wanted to share that side of what it feels like to be injured. On top of that, I was the one in charge of my own WorkSafe claims, which was horrible. And I feel like I wasn't articulating it or communicating it correctly so that I could get help, and it felt like I was really letting myself down. And I know that's not the case, but that's what it felt like. At one point, my secondary employer made a mistake, and WorkSafe told me that they needed to contact them, and then they needed to contact me, and my manager was telling me that I actually have to talk to this person. HR is telling me to talk back to him. He doesn't know what's going on because, like, this has never happened before at my other employer, so like I get it, but it was a lot to deal with, and it was very, very stressful. Unfortunately for me, it was a mental issue, and I was needing to use my brain a lot, even though I needed to rest it. So at the end of the day, I think I was just very unlucky. When I talked to my occupational therapist about this, she told me that everything that was happening in my life was the perfect storm, and that's because you guys don't know what was happening with my claim. If you're interested, I'll make a video on that separately, but it was honestly the worst of everything. No one was experienced with what to do during a pandemic, And so all my employers were struggling, but also I was struggling to get the help or the answers that I needed in order to help myself through WorkSafe, and WorkSafe didn't know, and then it was just kind of messy. That is my story. I am still working really hard to recover. I'm still seeing a physiotherapist. I still have my occupational therapist. I'm on modified work right now. And if you're interested about my experience, I will add it here. I remember tearing up because the task itself was so mundane and like something that I would take for granted back in the day when I was able to do everything that I could do before the accident. Like shelving books, like no problem. Do I want to do it? I don't mind doing it. I love doing it. We have a section in the bookstore where everything is not organized alphabetically or chronologically. It's organized by disciplinary and then by alphabetical order. So it was difficult because I had to keep looking down and up, and then I was walking around in circles, and my occupational therapist told me that I probably triggered a sense because I was moving my head in directions constantly, but also I was working around in small circles for a long period of time. And so it was difficult. It was very difficult for me to think that I couldn't do something so simple that I was so accustomed to doing and I took for granted. So it was very hard. I remember getting a little bit emotional. I took my break and then I FaceTimed my boyfriend, and he asked me why I was crying, and I wasn't crying. Like, my eyes were tearing up. Granted, I have very weak tear ducts. Ask any of my friends. But yeah, I guess we're not close friends if you haven't seen me cry. So if you've seen me cry, you the real ones. And I was just telling him that I wasn't crying because I was in pain. I wasn't crying because I was hurt. I was crying at the realization that my life was so much more different. See, I'm crying already. I guess we're all friends now. If you've seen me cry, you the real ones. I was crying at the realization that my life was just, had become so different. My injury doesn't seem that severe, and most concussions recover 6 weeks. But it's been 6 weeks, and people are still surprised that I'm having headaches and I'm having issues. I think it's also awkward because I don't want everybody to know about my injury, and I don't want special treatment for that because I'm not used to needing help. I'm a Capricorn. I'm very strong-willed, and I'm used to doing everything and anything, and that's why I have 2 part-time jobs, and I was going to school because I felt like I could do that, and it was normal for me to do that. I see so many hardworking individuals in my life, like my mom and my dad. I see my friends working hard to achieve their dreams. I follow so many inspirational entrepreneurs, and that's the normal. Like, that's what I feel I should be able to do, but I can't because I'm limited now. When I'm feeling horrible about myself, all I can do is lie down. I hope you guys have a great week. In between all of this craziness, I know a lot of bad things are happening in the world right now, and that's what made me feel 10 times worse, complaining, crying, or feeling sorry for myself when I know that there's much bigger things happening in the world. So I'm not trying to complain. I just thought it would be nice to share another side of the world. And if you're feeling bad about yourself, don't be, because as long as you are feeling like you and you're happy with life, then that's all that matters. And I'm so sorry I cried. Or like I teared up. I don't know if I cried on camera. I feel uncomfortable.